So in this video, I'm going to do the NBA drafts most likely twos. Just think of it like the high school yearbooks where you see most likely to succeed, most likely be a comedian, like that type of stuff. And I kind of just thought of it as an idea because all these players are kind of graduating from their leagues, college, and other ranks to the NBA. So let's get to it. First, I have most likely to be successful, and I'd say it's easily Victor Wembanyama. He's probably going to be the first All-NBA teamer, first All-Star, most likely first MVP. He has that type of trajectory, and once you see the highlights, as usual, you'll know why. So anything to do with real big success within the league in this draft is going to be Victor Wembanyama being the first one. Now with the rest of these are going to be a little bit more difficult. First, I think most likely to drop out, meaning most likely to be out of the league. And I made it more restricting for me, so I only did the lottery players, and I would have to go with Victor Wembanyama's teammate Bilal. With Bilal Coulibaly, he's still a young, talented player with upside, but I feel like within the lottery, you'd have one or two players that are very high upside, potential picks, where you didn't really see a lot in what he showed in the past season, but everybody has in their minds that they can improve to be even better. And that there has been a lot of examples of that case, but there's also been a lot of examples of the other way going. And I think it more matters towards the team that he goes to, the position that he plays, as well as his role on the team. I think there's too many factors compared to his skill level to really say he's going to live up to expectations or his potential, and that's why I have Bilal Coulibaly as most likely to drop out. So now I'm going to go into the rest of the, I would say, yearly awards. So I'm going to first go with most likely to be most improved player of the year, and I got Scoot Henderson. I know people are probably thinking, why Scoot? He's a third pick. Lillard's about to get traded, if not traded already. I don't know based off of when I make this video, but I have to say with Scoot, I think it's not going to be hard for him to adjust. I think he'll get his points, but I think within maybe the 1 or 2, 3 years he's first in the league, I think he's going to get a massive spike, kind of like a John Morant year, where he may average 17 this year, but the next year he jumps up to 25. And you really see the difference of the player he is and what he does for the team. And I think the reason why he may have a little bit of a slower start is because of where he's positioned at point guard with Anthony Simons. I feel it's another situation where it's like it's Lillard and CJ McCollum, just two guards in the same lineup. But Simons is obviously the better player at the moment, and he will probably get more ball handling duties, while Scoot will be a little bit more of a secondary, or they just split them off in two different lineups. Let's say Simons plays more with Sharp, or Scoot even plays more with Sharp, and then the other guard just plays with their backup shooting guard. Now with Defensive Player of the Year, I got Jarris Walker. Honestly, with Jarris, I see a lot of potential for him to be like a Bam Adebayo, where he could guard almost every position. I think there's obviously a cap to these type of players where they're around 6'7" to 6'9", and it's going to be harder to guard, of course, the biggest centers like a Jokic and Embiid, or the smallest guards, or the more craftier guards like a Kyrie or Steph Curry. But I feel like all around, he can really guard anybody, and he still has enough agility and just grace in general to be a good offensive player. But from day one, you're going to see him as being a defensive stopper. Like, he has the motor, he has the energy, and he has, for a big man of his size, he has the footwork and still is very strong for his size. So I feel like he's going to be most likely to be Defensive Player of the Year. With most likely to be Sixth Man of the Year, I'm kind of torn between two players, and that's Jalen Hood-Schifino and Cam Whitmore. With Jalen Hood-Schifino, I don't know, since he got drafted by the Lakers, I don't know how long he has until he's traded by the Lakers, like what Lakers do with all other young talent. So with Jalen Hood-Schifino most likely being a fringe starter, in my opinion, he could end up probably running a second lineup, and with his scoring ability and his potential to be a good 3-point shooter as well, and his decision making off of pick and rolls, I think he'll be well equipped to be a 6th man of the year. But with Cam Whitmore, knowing he was the higher ranked player going to the Rockets, I don't know if he ends up being as good of a fit for that role because of all their guard depth, and whether he ends up getting into that 6th man role, because based off of their team, they still have Kevin Porter that could end up coming off the bench. They have Terrence Easton that could still end up come off the bench, and they have Amen Thompson. So there's a lot of guard depth in just off the bench in general. So I don't know how quick he gets to that point, but I think Houston has a better priority of keeping him, which then can make me process more that if he stays with that current roster, where will he end up after, let's just say, 3, 4, 5 years? I don't expect VanVleet to be on the team. I don't know if Porter stays on the team, but you can expect most likely Thompson, Green, and Easton to still be on the team. And if they make Cam Whitmore their 6th man, in this case, he has a better case than Jalen Hood-Schifino. But again, I think with his injuries, at least what they said pre-draft, we don't know where his body is at the moment. So that's why I would put Jalen Hood-Schifino in front of him. But it's still the case of, will Jalen Hood-Schifino ever get to that role of a 6th man as well? So with the 6th man award, I think it's the hardest out of all of them to kind of predict, just because there's so many scenarios, including the team more than the player. So one I have made up was most likely to be a slow start, or I would just call it a slow starter, which basically means someone that has a small role to begin their career, but they end up being a starter. For example, maybe Chris Middleton, obviously not being a star in the league. I don't know if we could predict something as big as that, but I'll go into a more realistic form and just say starter. So I have Jordan Hawkins out of UConn and going to the New Orleans Pelicans, and I say this, he's going to be a slow starter because just the way it's hard for shooters to come into the league, and especially their expectations of being a 40% 3-point shooter to be a great 3-point shooter is going to be tough for him at first. Even though the Pelicans have a little bit more of a filled out roster, I think the intangibles that Jordan Hawkins has as an off-ball player can keep him on the court, and his potential as a defender as well, even though I don't think his on-ball defense is that good right now just because of his strength. But again, as years go by, he'll get stronger and he'll be able to hold off more drives from other players. But yeah, he definitely has a good form. He kind of reminds me, jump shot and off-ball movement-wise, he reminds me of Ray Allen. Obviously, I'm not putting that expectation, but that's what I see in him, just within his form. And then he still has, like I said, off-ball movement, can still play enough defense. And I think he ends up being a starter, if not on this team, another team. I think by the end of his 4 years, if he plays well enough and the roster ends up thinning out in some areas, maybe through trades or just people not reaching expectation, he could end up being a starter even on the Pelicans. So that's who I have as my slow starter. So lastly, we got most underrated and most overrated players, and for most underrated, I have Kobe Brown, the last pick of the first round. So a quick summary of Kobe Brown. He was supposed to be a second round talent by the end of the season, going into pre-draft workouts as well as draft combine workouts, and from that I've seen a lot of people having high praise of him, especially because of his showcase at the tournament, where he really showed off his strength, which being his catch and shoot ability. It was very high. I think it was like 40%, as well as his offensive abilities in general. He's a very capable passer. He looks like he's very reactive off of plays, and you can kind of put him in any position at the forward spot, as well as his defensive capabilities, where he could guard a 3 and a 4 very well. And to get that at a second round talent, but actually end up being a first round talent, shows how much he improved during that draft process. Also, as a player that can create and finish shots around the rim, his potential could be as high as a fringe starter, maybe even like a certified starter in the league. But I mostly have him being around a role player where you can set up actions with them. And to get that as your 30th pick, where in other drafts you see 30th picks and maybe high 20s end up never even playing in the league, is really good value for the LA Clippers. For most overrated, I have Brandon Miller, and the biggest reason is mostly his style of play compared to where I think he actually is. His style of play is basically wanting to be a 3-level scorer, 2-way player, and that's what most people have him projected as, but I feel like there's too many question marks within his game to say that's going to be him. I do see him very well as a 3-and-D player, where I think his spot up 3 is very good and he could guard a few positions, as well as his length really helps him through. But for the way he wants to play as a 3-level scorer, especially within his favorite player that he looks at in Paul George, I feel like he doesn't have a certain amount of his game, as well as his way to decelerate, his way to separate from his opponent, create space from his opponent. I think it's way slower than what he really would think it is. And at the NBA level, when the athleticism is even higher, I think that changes for him. And he didn't do it too well in college to end the year in the tournament. Even though he was improving that season to become that player, it didn't work too well at that moment. And unless if he makes some serious physical improvements on that sense, where Paul George has a deceleration, acceleration, which makes him more of a guard playing forward than Brandon Miller just being a forward. I think that his game and the way he plays and the way he moves is more like he has to look at another forward, at another small forward, to see how he could make his game better when it comes to creating shots, rather than Paul George, where I think he's more of a guard playing forward in the way he plays and the way he stops and goes and his pace of play. I see Brandon Miller in the same light I see Bilal Coulibaly, where he has the same physical traits, at least of what people say that could accelerate them into another level, with Brandon Miller's size as well as his wingspan. But I think other parts of his game physically where he's lacking, I think kind of brings him down when it comes to the player that he wants to be, where he's a 3-level scorer. He could do a lot of moves on the outside and all that. But I feel like if he just stays within the realms of him being a 3-and-D player, just to start in the league to solidify his spot as that and then build off of that, I think that's the best case scenario for him. But if he goes straight into the league trying to be that 3-level scorer and just kind of getting away from at least the team's offense, that could really hurt him in the long run. Alright, so those are my NBA drafts most likelies, and I want to know what you guys think. Do you think someone else could be most successful other than Wembanyama? It could be Scoot Henderson, or it could have been Amen Thompson, or maybe I'm fully wrong on Brandon Miller and he's really the most talented out of all of them to become the most successful. Who do you think is the most overrated, underrated? Let me hear your thoughts. And as always, thanks for watching.